on their behalf, I'm here with you for Advanced Database, Chapter 1. And now we're going to have a practical session today. So I will be introducing you to the topics that will be covered. We'll now share my access to with you. Yes, faculty members, all welcome here. This is the case study that we'll be considering today. I will just introduce you to the question that I have built up as a case study. Now here you are able to see that I have put all these tables which are financial account tables the way we have our bank data. We have the customer table here where we have the customer identity and all the other things regarding the customer. From the customer table, there is a key which is customer ID into the accounts table. So I have created a link with the primary key customer ID, and in the accounts table, we have the account number as a primary key. Once I have introduced these tables to you, then we directly go to the topics that we have to cover in Chapter 1. Now, looking at this access accounts table, that is account number is the primary key in the accounts table, and that becomes the foreign key in my transaction table, so that the customers who will be executing any transaction would have the account number here as the foreign key. Transaction ID has been kept as auto number. The transaction types that are possible are coming from the transaction type field running to the transaction. Then we have the account types. That means the various types of accounts that the customer is likely to hold. Now this moves from here and goes as the secondary key into the account type, that is the account table. Then as we know that we have ECS clearing these days, we have a table that I have kept for electronic clearance. So from the account number is connected to the electronic clearance. Here we have the various clearances that are possible. And from the customer table, lastly, we have a value added service table. This is connecting from my main customer ID to the customer ID of the value added service. Now, this was basically to show you that how I have organized the data so that we move ahead with the SQL queries. Once I will show you the data also, so you have an idea of how the data looks. Now, this is my customer table, that is my main table from which the data is going to run. I'll just, The account type comes from the account type table where I have various sets of accounts. Then I have the accounts table here. The thing to observe here is the customer ID is coming from the customer table into accounts by a lookup. And that is why we are able to see this here. That means when I am creating the customer ID, I created a lookup in the accounts table from customer table. Taking you to my electronic data, again here, electronic clearance is also getting the account number as a lookup. Transaction table, transaction ID is my auto number, and all other fields have been put in. Transaction type is what is likely that could be the transaction types. And we have value added services. So this is about, now we are going to close all the tables and start with the queries. Okay, now firstly we are looking at creating the subqueries. Now subquery, first we create a simple query, pick up that query and put it into the SQL, and the subquery modifies itself for its sub option from the SQL part. So this is where we have to show the students about the SQL. Now firstly I am selecting the accounts table here. I select the accounts table. I just close this property sheet so you have a better view. I will just minimize this ribbon. Yes. I hope now you are getting my screen here. Now, in the first query that I'm going to create, I'm going to use the customer ID and the balance. So here, our query is just a simple. Okay. Now, this is a query where we are getting the accounts table, where I'm having the customer ID and the balance. Now, with this, I'm just putting a criteria for a simple query where I say I'm looking out for records where I have at least 10 lakhs in the accounts. I hope my screen is visible to all of you. Okay. I'm creating the query with the table. The balance. Now, firstly, we just check that we are getting all the records. Okay, now let us check that we will include the balances which are having some criteria. So we go to its design, we put the criteria here. And then we run this query. Now when we are executing this query, depending on what is the value that is being executed, just a minute. Some problem with access. Okay, we are looking at the very first query, that is the subquery part, where we say query design. I select the accounts table and I'm closing it. Now I start putting the criteria for the normal query, and then from that we start creating the subquery. Now when I'm selecting customer ID over here and the balance, first time I'm getting all the data as for all the customers. Now I am wanting to put some criteria into my subquery, and so for the normal query I am using the value here as criteria greater than. I use this. Then I have selected records which should be coming here. Now in order to use a subquery, we will have to go to the SQL part of the query. That is, I go to its SQL now, and as you can see, it says select accounts.customer ID, accounts.balance. So these are the two fields that we have selected from accounts, where accounts balance is greater than 10 lakhs. Now this is going to be my subquery. So for this, I have to see that I have an outer query. I will select this Control C and start a new query. There I say, here I am going to select the customer table. Coming back to its SQL, I will have to paste whatever I have taken from my subquery and put it here. Now when I paste this over here, you will have to note one thing, that for a subquery, you need to write the proper SQL, and only then we are able to execute the subquery. So here we say select customer dot customer ID, since I want the customer ID to be displayed. I also want the first name and last name. I can use that here or I can put it later on from my design. So I'm just saying from customer here. And as you must have noted till now that from would go on to the next line in the subquery. So we say select customer.customer ID. So I'm finally trying to pick up the customer ID from the customer table. And this is going to now be the where I'm going to check that customer.customer ID should be in, because till now we were getting so many results. Now we need to put a subquery here and take this in down and put a additional round bracket. So after in, you will have to put all the select that you have will go into this in. So this indicates that till now from accounts we are picking up the customer ID and accounts balance. Now what we are trying to do is we are going to run a subquery for this, that on whatever data has been got in my previous query. Now I'll just show you the output of my previous query. Here I have the cust ID which is from the accounts and the balance. So you would be noting here as per the output that if there is any cust ID which has two balances, that means two accounts in the accounts table, then you are able to see that my second and my third record here has got the same cust ID. So my subquery is going to aim that I just want to pick up only the customer IDs which are one each. So that I would be able to pick up from customer ID, right? Because as it is the primary key there. Now when I go into this and execute, here it should first tell me that I need to select accounts from accounts where account balance is greater than. Now since I have one bracket over here, you will have to see, you will have to remove all the additional brackets here. So the subquery that is executing from here is having additional brackets and the zeros 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you have to check that when you have typed it here also it is the same. So what you will get after this execution should be that you will not have this because I have already given a where up there. Okay, so from accounts where account balance, here we can directly say is greater than, and you execute. Now this should execute separately in select. Now we do not want these two things. Okay, so now we are able to get this SQL that we are looking at. Yeah. Now this is giving you where I have put the subquery here. So this is my final subquery where I said select account number from accounts, where account number in select transaction from transaction. So this becomes the subquery. So originally my query was this, when I need to run and get you the result. So from the first one, we then move to the subquery which gives us only the result where we want to see the customer ID and the account. So that was the first subquery that we executed. Now we look at one more. Now you select the transaction. Now when you have selected the transaction table, we will take the account number and the transaction date from there. Now when you take the transaction date, now first time we execute, so we are able to get all the transactions with all the dates. Later on, now what I'm trying to do is, I will say if I'm looking at, say, first 3 months of 2015. So I'm just putting the criteria here as between. So I type it as between hash 01-01. So here your date format that you have used is very important. You'll have to take care of which date format you are using. And hash 31 dash, I'm looking for third month, so first 3 months, and I say this. So with this, I am getting only the data which is for the first 3 months. Now after you have done this, you will have to again open the SQL of this particular. Again, when you have opened the SQL, you select your SQL, Control C, and you come to the subquery part where you're going to put the, now in the blank window we are going to put, let's take this query design, and here I will select the accounts table. So I add the accounts table here, and we simply have to type it here. Whatever you have got it from there, we will say we will select the account number here. This is the second style of the subquery. And I will say in, and we type the entire query. Now with this, you will have to see that you do not require the, see what you can do here is the entire contents which have come here. You can even go and put it in the SQL. So our subquery should allow us to move. SQL. Delete this part and just say in, and we put the entire SQL over here. When you run this, it should show you that in select, that means your subquery tool should give you this result. That means we want only the account number of the particular transaction. So this is our SQL view where we say that the transaction, we have said in select transaction.account number, transaction.transaction date. From which table? This time transaction table. So this is going to check out for the date, and this gives you the subquery option. So with this, we are able to pick up the second subquery, and when you come to the second subquery, you will see that in the design view, it will just put in, and by expanding this, you will see the entire contents will come as in whatever was the previous command, and in the SQL, you are able to see this. So that means the query that will be executed first here is from this part. Select transaction.account number from transaction, where we check for this date. And later on, what we are picking up is from the accounts table, we want the account number. But we are checking that this account number should be a part of this particular previous query that had given us the result. So with this part, I hope the subquery part is clear. Now we are going to look at our next thing, that is, we are looking at the unmatched query. Now unmatched query is to be created through the query wizard. In our query wizard, we have 4 options: the simple query wizard, the cross-tab query result, duplicates and unmatched. We are going to go in the reverse order. We are firstly looking at unmatched query. Now, unmatched basically means that you are checking for two tables. See, as our indication here on the left shows us that there would be two tables that would be checked. Like for example, in the first case, you will take the accounts table and the transaction table. Now, there could be various accounts of which transaction have been executed and of which some have not been executed. So we select the accounts table, and after that now we are selecting the transaction table. So what done? First query said which table or query contains records we want in the query results. We want what is extra in the accounts but have not executed the transactions. So we get the. Now always when we are doing a simple queries, we observe that we are checking on equality. But with an unmatched query, we are checking on inequality. So we are checking that the account number which is there in accounts may not be there in the transaction table. So we want the records which are not matching. Now next, it will ask us what fields do you want to see in the query results. Now besides what it is going to check for, we want to see the customer ID, account number, and account type. So we say next. Now the query, the unmatched query, in fact the wizard by itself puts the name. If you want this name, you can keep it this way, or you say unmatched from transaction. And you say finish. Okay, so this is the customer, this is the ID of the customer for this particular account who has not transacted any entry in the transaction table. This was about the unmatched. We just do one more example on unmatched. So we are selecting your query design, query wizard, going for unmatched query. And we are selecting the customer table, after which we are also selecting the accounts table because we need two tables to check. Now depending on which is the key within them, it is checking for non-equality, after which it will ask us what are the extra fields that you want to see. So we are looking at customer ID, and suppose that with that I want to know the first and the last name. So with this, we have customers without matching accounts. So we say customers without accounts. That means this first ID is there, but the account probably has not been executing and so it has become dormant or something like that. So we say that, I'm just giving this name. These are the customers, that is the first ID and the first name, which is indicating that these are unmatched records. Query result, duplicate query. Okay. Now we are looking at what is known as duplicate query. Duplicate means there would be more than one record of that particular key that we are checking for in that table. Now just as we know that in our accounts table, under one cust ID, there could be multiple accounts of a customer. So I am selecting the accounts table, which says next. Here it asks which fields might contain duplicate information. Now it could be that the customer ID is repeated in the accounts table. So I select this, then I say account number, and then I say account type. And then I say next. Now, do you want the query to show fields? Okay, 1 minute, sorry. In the previous one, we will not take these two because we want those as additional fields. Here we are saying duplicate value, so only cust ID. Going to the next. Now I will plan for what I want to see with my cust ID, so which is the account number, which is having records and the account type. Now it is saying duplicates. So we don't say find duplicates. I'll just say duplicates for accounts and it will give me this. Now in this, when you observe that actually the count would be greater than 1. This is the way the SQL query actually operates. That means the accounts which are appearing more than once in the account table are displayed as the query result set. Coming back to show you the design of this query. Here it is going to keep a check on count and the count should be greater than 1. That is that in select customer ID from accounts as TMP group by this, having this. So this is the way it is going to execute the query. That means the records are more than once for duplicate. Coming to its SQL, you will see that again this is a kind of a subquery because it tells you that the count is greater than 1. So with this, we have done 2 examples of our subquery, duplicate query. The next topic for today that we would be looking is the group by. That means we are going to do grouping and summarizing records using certain criteria. These queries are also known as the group by or the totals query. Now, when I start a query in the query design, I will select a particular table, say for example, I am selecting the transaction table. This is from where this totals, that is the summation sign, from where we would be adding how a grouping query would appear. When we use this summation, that is totals, it adds a new row in the query design window. These are also known as aggregate functions, which would be enabled when we click on totals. The aggregate functions could be something like, see, the moment I clicked on totals, you would have seen that the list over here has changed. So here we have the options group by, and we have various aggregate functions like sum, average, min, max, count, and so on. Now first time we will look at, see, we will select the transaction type. Okay, now when I have selected the transaction type, it has come total group by. So by the type of transaction that has been executed in the transaction table, we will be using the transaction amount. Now when I say transaction amount, here I will not select group by, I will select sum. And with this, it will give me the summation of each type of transaction. That means transaction type deposit at these, then transfer, withdrawal. So this is how we have calculated the sum. There are various ways in which you can calculate all these aggregate functions. Now I will do one more for you like this. We can also take multiple tables when we are using a group by. So let's do an example with count, where I select the customer table and the accounts table. So here I have selected the customer table and the accounts table. Now in the customer table, I am selecting the cust ID. So at this point of time, since I want to do the group by, I am using the totals as we did in the last query. Now selecting from the accounts table, I am using the account number. But with this, I do not want group by. I am trying to count how many records are there which are for each customer. So when I execute this query, see, it gives me a count under each cust ID, how many records are there. Now this is the heading that Access provides for the new column name. If you want to give something else, you can go and change it in the SQL view here, as it is as count of account number. But you cannot use only account number because it's a field name. You cannot use only count as it's a keyword. So you'll have to use something where you do not use a reserved word. But you are able to change this if you require from here. So whatever you want as a field name, you can put it. This was about the second type of the totals query. Now in this itself, we can also put certain criteria. Just as first, let us see what we will do is, in this we know that the records that are coming as they are appearing in the table. Now suppose I say I want to put the account number in some sorted order. So I am moving to its design. Here by default you will see the sort order is not there. By default it is not sorted. If I say ascending, now the query result set will come in the ascending order of the account number, that is a count. When you come to its SQL, you will be able to see that the moment I have used the sort, it has used the order by. Prior to that, we didn't have the order by. Now I'll take it back to its design. The moment when it was not sorted, it looked like this. So we had the group by, but we did not have the order by. Now the moment we put the ascending here, you note that in the SQL, there is a order by. But since it is ascending, you do not have that ascending written over here. In case I change that same option in my design window to descending and I execute the query again, this is count account number is in the descending order. And now when you go to its SQL, you have descending, the ESC. So here we are working in the descending order. So you will note that here the descending order, the entire full spelling is not there, only first 4 alphabets are used in the SQL. So for ascending it is only order by, for descending that keyword is used. Now in the same query, if you were supposed to have more options, like if you want to put the criteria over there, you can also put the criteria. I'll just put the criteria back for you here. So we had said that in the query design, we were using the accounts and the transaction. Okay, with this, we had seen that we had done the totals, wherein you had the customer ID and you had the account number. So we were doing the totals, here we had the count. Now whether or not you use the descending is up to you, but I say that till now I was seeing the records for 1 and 2 both, right? So now I say I want the records to come wherein I want account number from the accounts table. So we have cust ID, we have the account number here, and this time we are not taking it from the transaction table. Next, what we are doing from the transaction, I'm using transaction ID and I use a count. When I use this count, we have seen that we are putting a descending. Now I'm also using a criteria here, but I want it to be greater than or equal to 2. Only then you display. So the ones that are giving me 1 are not seen here now. Coming back to its design. Now when I come back to its design, we have that in the same query. If I'm going to use like balance, now balance cannot be a group by. So if I have to use the balance, I will have to say where. Since it's a non-aggregate. This is a non-aggregate I'm using, so I cannot keep it show also. I will show it as less than 5 equal. Yeah. And I execute this, and this is the criteria that has been executed. So we save scaling. With this, we have done the grouping. Now the next query that we would be looking at is the, okay, now we are back. I'm sorry for the disconnection. I'm continuing back with the next type of query that we are supposed to see. That is grouping and summarizing records using a cross-tab query. Now basically a cross-tab is an analytical tool. This is the type of query that can be created to describe one numerical quantity in terms of 2 other fields. So we will use the query wizard for this cross-tab. Using this, we will select the cross-tab query and you say OK. Now this will ask you that you want to use a cross-tab on which table. For now, I'm using the accounts table. So which table of query contains the fields you want for the cross-tab query result? We select the accounts table and we move on to next. Now it is asking the table and we click on next. Which field values do you want as your row headings? Now on the row side, that is your, when I select customer ID, we have this query, and on the column side we are taking, that is we go to the next screen. The best part of the cross-tab is it gives you a sample as to how your output is going to look. Now which field values do you want as your column headings? So we have seen that we have taken, let's take account type. So we get the different types of accounts, and here when we come to the next part, we want to give here in the cost tab a particular function that would be like our aggregate. So we select that on the balance, let's count how many records are there under one first ID and the account type. Now if you see here, we have a question, do you want to summarize each row? You says yes, include row sums. Now when you include row sums, that means if I talk about customer ID this, so the row total would be there. We would have an additional column just after customer ID which would display the row sums. We say next. Now you will see that by default it gives you as the cross-tab name. Now if you want that cross-tab name, you can keep it that way, or you can even change it to anything else. Okay. Now if I say just, I'm saying cross-tab, cross 1. So I say finish. Now observe the result, that is in the first field we have the customer ID. Here we have the total of the row sums. That means under each type of account, if there are under one cust ID, this one, we have a demat account and we have a savings account. Now, if we have two accounts, then we have total of the balance here. So this is the column that has come when we have ticked that we want the row sums. Had we not selected the row sums, then this particular column wouldn't have come. So this additionally tells us that under each customer ID, how many accounts are there of each particular customer. Coming to its design view. Yes, this is something very different. You will see that in a cross tab, it says group by. For row heading and column heading, it says group by. So again, this is a kind of totals, the aggregate kind of a query, because it's making use of the group by. Now we have group by whatever we selected for the row heading, and we have group by for whatever we selected as the column heading. And the function that we selected count on the balance. This is this particular column. And the column which is actually seen here at the end is the one which has come immediately after cust ID. It comes after the row because it's a row heading. So total of balance, that is giving you the count as per that row heading. Now, had you not enabled that row sums, then this particular would not have come. And now looking at how the SQL looks. The cross-tab SQL is a transform query. It uses the transform, and the rest of the things are like it's selecting from table group by. And one more point to note here is the cross-tab query is a kind of a pivot. So it's doing the pivot here. Now moving back to its design, had I not selected this particular row sums there, so then this field would be eliminated. So we delete here and see how it comes. I delete this and I say run. So now you are able to see that you are not getting this first additional row that had come. So this is a form of cross-tab query where you will be able to see in your SQL that that particular row sum has been eliminated. This is about the cross-tab. Now it is not that the cross-tab could only be done through the wizard. We can also do the cross-tab by using the normal query, and then we can change its type. When we say query design, we also see that whatever table we are selecting, we have the cross-tab as the option here. So you can even do it from here. Now the cross-tab that we would be doing for checking the months. Now we are checking for the month name here. So I am using another query wizard using the cross-tab once again. And this time I select the transaction table. Last time we did it with the accounts table, okay? So now I say transaction. Now which row do you want as the row heading? I say transaction date. So on the row side you will see that the dates would come. Now going to the next. In the columns we have the transaction type. And when I come to the next screen, it will ask me what number do you want calculated for each column and row intersection. So let's take the count of the transaction ID. Now I have the transaction here and I'm taking the count. So I have next. Again, you can give it any particular name depending on what you want. If I say transaction cross. Yes, now here it is probably that depending on all the dates. So actually as for my data there is only one transaction per date, and that is why you are able to see 1 everywhere. Now if I want not the entire date for the transaction date time, and I want to see the month in which this transaction has taken place. Then I can go to its design view. We will go to its design view this time. Now when you come to its design view, we need to change the way the date time is written here. So we move here and we put something here. Now here we will be putting that this is the particular month in which we are doing. So we will say month, and then this is the column that I want to show. So I will say the month function, and then followed by how my field is written. So the way my field is written now, since I am using month function, I have the round bracket to look at. Then since I am putting the field, I have transaction that is tran underscore date time. I will close the square bracket first and then the round bracket. Now this gives me the same result, but it is not giving me the entire date. It is only giving me that in which month this particular transaction has happened. That means in my design, I am making use of the month function. And since I gave month as the heading here, you will see that you are able to see this heading as month. Now we can still enhance this. Now if I say that I have got the month, but I want to find the month name for this particular month. So I can put one more function here just before this. I can say month name. It's a joint function, there is no space between month name. And then since this is another function that we are using, we have one more additional round bracket. With this we are able to see now get the month names. Now since we have month names, we are having that order of April because it has gone into the order of the ABC. Now we are adding a condition. So this was about changing to the month, then we changed to the month name. Now if I am going to try and check that these are all the transactions, but if I want for a particular period, so I will put some more condition over here in the cross tab. Say I want that the transaction date, so I am using transaction date time, and I am trying to select when I have selected transaction date time, I do not need a group by here. I will need a where, because I am trying to check for the last financial year. So that means I am going to check that the criteria should be between a certain range. So in this criteria, I will come to where. Now where between? Between what? Now between I say hash 1-4-2014, as I am trying to say that I am taking the last financial year. And then I say and 1-3-2015 and a hash. So with this we have the transactions which would be only between the last financial year. Now let us see how this is executed. So here we are only having something in December and January. Okay, means for 2014 we have December, and for 2015 in Jan, Feb, March we have only Jan. So this is a kind of cross tab which is giving you many things where you are picking up as per date time, then choosing for the name of the month, and so on. And here I also put a criteria for between. Now also create by the cross tab should be created by the normal query because it is possible. So with that, the cross tab part is over. The next kind of query that I'm trying to show you now, we would be moving on to the pivot table and the pivot chart. Now, pivot table is actually a view and access query that allows summarizing and examining the data in a datasheet form. So, just as we say that we will be taking tables and firstly taking the data as per what is the requirement and then trying to make a pivot table out of it. Now, when you note here in the view, in 2010 we had this pivot table and pivot chart. Actually, this has been eliminated from 2013 onwards. So, if any of you are using 2013, you will not get this particular option as the pivot table and pivot chart. They're actually using it in Excel only by importing the data or exporting the data from or through Access and creating the tables and chart in Excel. But in 2010, of course, we have to show the students the pivot table and the pivot chart. Now, this kind of a table allows summarizing and examining the data in a datasheet form. This is actually by when once we create the query, like if in case of transaction, I say I'm taking transaction ID, transaction type, and transaction amount. And from the accounts table, I'm taking the customer ID. Now, this is what I'm looking out for. So basically what I've done is I've taken few fields here to pick up that the transaction number, the type of transaction. Okay, what we'll do is we'll just go and we'll sort this. We'll say transaction ID, sort. And we will sort it as for ascending. So we are able to see the data like this. Now this is what our query has given, and now we are going to use this in order to use in the pivot table. So I say view pivot table. When we go to pivot table, you will observe that this is created by dragging the fields to the appropriate area on the design screen. You have drop filter fields here. That means whichever field you want to drop as a filter. Like for example, if I pick up this field and I put it to the drop filter fields. Then we have drop row column fields over here. So if I say I want to pick up the transaction type and drop it here. So we have the transaction names. Here we have the customer ID. And here we have the different types of transactions. Besides this, looking at the 4 areas that are there, we have to give it some values. Now the row fields that we want to put is, let us pick up transaction ID and put it into the row fields. And we take the transaction amount and drop it here into the detailed data. So now this gives you a very easy and summarized look of your transactions that are there in the table. And it is also going to give us as per the customer ID. Now, when you observe this pivot, it is going to show you all the transactions of all the customers, right? I'll just take you down to the data and show you. It is showing you data for all the customers. If I say I'm selecting cust ID, that is a particular cust ID, I'm not selecting all, just disabling all, and for a particular customer, then I will get records which he has transacted only for that particular customer. So in this way, the pivot gives a very good look, an easy, simple understanding. Okay, I'm changing the customer ID, and this is the way it will happen. So this is about the pivot table. Now from the pivot table, what we can build is also the pivot chart. The pivot chart is actually a tool which is graphical, and the graphical analysis of data is very easy to be seen. Different chart formats are used for data analysis. Now if I go to the pivot chart from here. Okay, this is again having drop areas. Okay, now as in my, one sec, I'll just take you to my pivot table since I had taken only one here. I'll just take all. So I want to see for all. Now I move on to the pivot chart. Now in the pivot chart, you will observe that again we have these fields that we have to drop. Like in this case, I'm picking up the customer ID. Okay, that has already come here by default. Otherwise, I pick it up and put it here. Now we take this has come as the transaction ID. I'm fine with it. If I want to change the look, I can. And then we put the transaction type here. And you can pick up this transaction amount and you can say that you can have the sum of the transaction amount. So by looking at this, you will see that we can make a transaction wise. And once I also enable the legend, now it becomes more clear that you have the deposits, those are below the transfers and the withdrawal. Now if I want to change the name for this particular axis, as I know it's the transaction amount, I will double click on this. Then I right click here, go to its properties. This property window will open up, go to format and change the caption here. So I can say transaction amount. And we can close this. So this is the transaction amount window. Now, same thing I can do here. I can directly click here and mention that this is actually my transaction ID. So we can change this and make this on transaction ID. Of course, you can also change the look of how you want it to be seen. I suppose I am using a Courier New over here. So this would look like this. I can change the size depending on if I want to. So it looks more visible. Of course, you can bold it. You can also use color over here. So it enhances the look of it. Here we have various options. Same thing we could have done here also. I've just shown you on one. Now this is a legend. It is very, very necessary that when you are creating a pivot chart, you put a legend. So it gives a pictorial look of how it is going to be seen. From here, you can also change the chart types. We have the options here where you can change the chart types. Now looking at what would give you a better look of your data, you would be selecting that particular type of chart. So this was an operation that we had executed. Now with this, we now move on to our topic of joins in the queries. Yeah, now I say first I will select two tables and then I will tell you what are joins. I'm selecting say customer table. I'm adding the customer table and I also add the accounts table. Then I say close. Now it is a question we can ask to our students first. What is this connection between two tables here seen as? When you see this, it will tell you that it is the connection of the relationship. But fairly speaking, our relationship is only seen in the relationship window. The table relationship is only and only in the relationship window. What you see in the query window between the different tables is not the relationship. If you right click here, you will see these are the join properties. So actually, when the relations are used in the query window, it is making use of the association of relationship and creating a join. Now when I open the join property, first I want to explain that what is a join. There are basically three types of joins. First, the inner join. It checks for equality on the particular key in both the tables. The second is the left outer join, which will pick up records from all records from the left table and only corresponding records from the right table. And the third type is a right outer join, which means that it will pick up all records from the right table and only matching records from the left table. So now what we do is, we have observed that when we open the join properties, always the first one would be the default, and that is actually the inner join. Now how do you know where the inner join is? Let's keep this as OK and select particular fields. So I select customer ID and I select account number and account type. Now when I execute this query, I get matching on the customer ID in both the tables. I am able to get the values. We will have to take the students to first the design view, see the way it was that we have put. The next thing is take them to the SQL view, and only then we will be able to justify to them that this is the inner join. That means we know then matching records from both tables on a particular key, and this is known as the inner join. So this is the first kind of join. Now let us look at, let's save this. So now we are done with the inner query. And I save this query and also close the query. Now let us take the tables where we want to check for the left outer join. Now as we know, there are many accounts in the accounts table, but not all have transacted a transaction. So let's make use of that concept of a left outer join over here. I say query design, I say accounts table, and I take the transaction table. Now once again, when you right click here exactly, you say it's a join. Now the first one is the inner join. If I want to use the concept of an left outer join, then the second option says include all records from accounts. When I say accounts, it is this particular table, but it's more easy for us to explain to them that it says left outer says that you include all records from the left table. That means the one on the left, and only matching records from the right table. In our case, it's the transaction table. So we click on this, and now of course we have to give it some kind what we want to see. Now we want to see the account number, and we want to see the date time of the transaction as well as the transaction type. Now in this case, we will have all records from the accounts table. Now see, you are able to see here in the query result set, we also have an account number which has not transacted anything. Now in case I was doing the same query with the inner join, this particular record wouldn't come because it checks matching from both. But here, since my join is left join, it is picking up all the records from the account table and matching from the transaction. This is a very good example of, we can say, the query which is the left query. Now coming back to our right join, we say create query design. This time I'm also trying to include one of my table which I have kept as transaction type, and I'm taking the transaction table. Right. Now with this you will see that we are picking up the transaction type from the transaction type table and transaction ID from this table. But since we want to make it a right join, we will have to include all records from transaction, because our transaction is the right table, and so I have to use the production. Include all records from transaction, and only those records from transaction type with the join fields are equal. And we say OK. Now even note that when we change the right join, the arrowhead changes. This is what. Now it has taken all from the transactions, so definitely all the 35 transactions which come and the matching from the transaction type. Now how would you know that only matching from the transaction type have been taken? Because here if you observe my data, I have got this showing deposit, withdrawal and transfer. If I show you my transaction type table, then also I have an RTGS over here, which is not included in my transactions. So there are no RTGSs done in my transaction table, but it is there in the transaction type. But as this kind of a query that I'm showing you is a right join query, it will not have the RTGS because it does not have any of the records which have RTGS in the transaction. So the right join says all from right and only matching from left. For that matter, look at how the query has changed the type and it's this arrow. The same would have also happened when we were doing the left join. In that also the arrowhead says, when I say left join, then it's saying it's moving from left to right. And when I'm saying this is right join, the arrow is moving from right to left. I can now save this and we'll say query underscore right. And we'll say so you can just say sum up and paste. And you say save, close off. Now we are looking at the last topic for today. That is the calculated fields. We have to show that in our advanced queries, we are also able to incorporate the calculated fields. Now calculated fields would have some field in the query result set which is not there in our table. Simple as that. Like for example, I say query design and I select the accounts table. And I add it over here. When I add the accounts table over here and I select the account number, the balance, I say I have the account number and balance. Now say suppose I want to say that I'm going to, this is my normal query that I'm getting. Now I say I don't want these values, say I want to give them a 0.1% multiplication on the balance, and that should be added to their balance in the query results. So in this case, instead of putting this balance directly, I will say new underscore balance and whatever is my field, balance is my field. So I say balance and after that I am going to add what I am going to calculate. So I say plus sign, again balance, yes the spelling should be exactly right, otherwise it will run to a search for a parameter. And then I say 0.1. Now if you observe this, we want this time, we do not want this. Now this should execute and calculate the balance. This is a calculated field. So whatever has happened, now I have added that much and this is known as the calculated field. If you go to its SQL, you have the calculation here. I'll just show you one last example on calculation also. Now since we have in the customer table, we have the first name and last name separately. But in my query result set, I want it together. So I say create query design. Customer, close. Okay, now the last kind of calculated field that I want to show you is here. Now if I select the customer ID, and instead of me putting the first name and last name in two separate fields, I say that I want it to come in one field together. That means I want to see the full name. Now here I will type how I want to see it. I want the heading as full name of customer and give a colon here. Just expand this size so you are able to see exactly what you want. Now here I want to put the first name. Firstly, it's very important that your field name should exactly match how it is there in the table here. I want to concatenate. Now if I say I am concatenating two text fields, then what I will do here is last name. Now there is something tricky I want to show you over here. You will have to observe what trick I want to show you here. Now when I say I am concatenating first name and last name, we all know that when our name has been written and we enter the first name in the table, we don't have any extra spaces. Same thing before the last name, we do not have any extra spaces. So in this case, what's going to happen is if I use this query, definitely my first name and last name will come together, but it will cling to each other. Now this is something which we do not want. We don't want it to cling to each other. In this case, we come back to its design view. And here, we should see you put extra spaces over here. This is the way. Now when you put extra spaces over here, you are automatically able to, yes. Now we will need one more concatenation because we are then concatenating this field with the last name. So these are the extra spaces that I will be putting. Now this is the way the presentation of the calculated field. See, the previous one I showed you calculated field was on the number data type. But what about a calculated field on the text field? So this is what I wanted to show you, that by using on a text field, you can use it like this. So with this, we are done with the first chapter of Advanced Database. Now here, if you have any queries that you have, so then we can discuss those things. Yes, I'm just waiting if anybody has any questions for this particular session. Or if not now, then when we have the second chapter, we can have the questions at the beginning of the second chapter so that your doubts are cleared if you are able to have something today. So to summarize to you what all we have covered today is we have seen the subqueries which actually are created first as normal queries. Then we pick up the normal query SQL and add it to the additional SQL that we have to write for a subquery. So for a subquery, you definitely have to know to write SQL. Then we also did today was we looked at the unmatched query through the wizard. After which we did the duplicate query through the wizard. So these two are very simple. Then we looked at grouping and summarizing records using criteria. Before which we didn't use criteria. First we did grouping and summarizing the records. That is, we tried to see how you can use the totals, that is a sum function. Firstly we did with one table, after which I showed you a combination of tables. After combination of tables, you can show them that you can use it on ascending, descending. When you take them back to SQL, how descending looks. If you are putting a non-aggregate value over there, like I had shown you for balance, then in that case, what I did is, you will not keep that show on. You would check for the non-aggregate by giving an unshow. Later on, we also said we saw the cross tab. Cross tab also makes use of your grouping, as it's having one on the row, the other on the column side, and a grouped function, that is something that you want to calculate as a group by having that you have it on the combination of the cell. After the cross tab, we even checked out that with a cross tab, we looked out for particular transactions in that particular time frame. With that, I showed you the month function. We did the month name function also today. We later on moved on to the pivot table, which has 4 fields as drop areas. The legend in the pivot chart is very important. There also you have 4 types of drop areas. With the pivot chart, the legend and the name of the X and Y axis can be changed. Then we came to the joins. The joins as they appear in the query window are only a resemblance of the relationship that is in the relationship window. The types of joins that we saw today were the inner join, left outer join, and the right outer join. Left outer and right also, you will have to take them to SQL and show them how it is seen in the SQL window written as left outer and right outer. And lastly, I showed you a calculated field. Firstly, a numeric field, that is a number field. And the last query that I showed you was a calculated field on the text data type. So with this, I take your leave.